money. Bitch better have my money. Bitch better have my money. Bitch better have my money. That's all I gotta say about it. Bitch better have my money. My money. Bitch better have my money. Bitch better have my money. Bitch better have my money. Only thing, I got one thing to say to you, Pamela Harris, and that is, bitch better have my money. 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 You see, I'm over here sweating hard. Good Lord, better have my money. Yeah, what I tell you, my bottom home, man. She made sure I had my money. Yeah, Pamela Harris, you did good, man. You did good, man. That's a good bitch. Should have had my money. Bitch better have my money. Bitch better have my money. Bitch better have my money. Better have my money. Better have my money. Bitch better have my money. Bitch better have my money. Roy Jr. Bitch better have my money. 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 Turn out to be a good bitch. Bitch better have my money. Bitch better have my money. Run me my money.
The yeas are 220. The nays are 211. The motion is adopted.
Better have my money. Pelosi, you get some dick tonight. You and Pamela Harris. I want both of y'all in the suite tonight. Tonight. I'm fucking both of y'all at the same time. Oh, it's love. It's all love. Don't worry about it. Bitch better have my money.
To serve the people of the 11th Congressional District of my appreciation for their support as I sought to represent their interests and those of many Americans for whom I could be a voice is boundless. I will always remember my colleagues and friends who have become a part of my family during the last 12 years. I am fortunate to have been selected by President Joe Biden to continue to serve the public good as Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. Therefore, please accept this correspondence as notice of my reservation. formally, pursuant to Rule 8 of the Rules of the U.S. House of Representatives, that I, Elizabeth Beltran, have been served with a subpoena for testimony issued by the United States District Court for the Middle District of Florida. The testimony sought relates to events witnessed while I was employed by the Speaker's office as a staff assistant. After consultation with the Office of General Counsel, I have determined that compliance with the subpoenas is consistent with the privileges and rights of the House. Signed sincerely, Elizabeth Beltran.
Will you please have order in the House? For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 188, I call up H.R. 8, the Bipartisan Background Checks Act of 2021, and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk report the title of the bill.
H.R. 8, a bill to require a background check for every firearm sale.
Pursuant to House Resolution 188, the bill is considered read. The bill is debatable for 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking member of the Committee on the Judiciary. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, and the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Jordan, will each control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material on H.R. 8.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself 3 minutes.
Recognized for 3 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, gun violence impacts all of our communities, and no place is immune from its reach, including our homes, our streets, our schools, and even our places of worship. That is why we must take swift and decisive action to reduce the daily toll of gun violence that afflicts our nation.
Bitch better have my money. Yeah, we all past that. Run me my money.
Legislation to do just that.
Run me my money. Run me.
Gun sales conducted by licensed firearms dealers may only be completed if the buyer clear background checks. This bill would simply extend that requirement, with limited exceptions, to guns transferred by unlicensed individuals as well. That simple change to close a gaping loophole in the law is one of the most effective steps we can take to address the scourge of gun violence in this country. According to one study, 22% of gun owners in the U.S. acquired their most recent firearm without a background check. We do not know if they were felons, fugitives, domestic abusers, or otherwise prohibited under the law for possessing firearms. A huge volume of guns was sold with no questions asked. It is time to close this dangerous loophole. There is no reason to continue to make it easy for people who are legally prohibited from possessing firearms to acquire them. And the evidence clearly shows that background checks work and significantly curb gun violence. One study found that a Connecticut law requiring background checks was associated with a 40% decline in gun homicides and a 15% drop in suicides. On the other hand, when Missouri repealed its background check law, the state's gun homicides increased by 23% and suicides increased by 16%. Gun violence of this magnitude is a distinctly American problem. A recent study in the American Journal of Medicine found that compared to 29 other high-income countries, the gun-related murder rate in the United States is 25 times higher. Even when you adjust for population differences, Americans are disproportionately killed by gun violence. This is a disparity that we can remedy by passing this bill. With the exception of certain limited transfers, such as gifts to family members and transfers for hunting, target shooting, and self-defense, H.R. 8 would extend the current federal background check requirement, which applies now only to licensed gun dealers, and would require virtually all transactions to undergo a background check to help ensure that firearms do not end up in the wrong hands. I thank Representative Mike Thompson of California for drafting this important legislation and for being a champion of gun violence prevention in Congress. Simply put, H.R. 8 will save lives. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation and to support safer streets, safer schools, and safer communities. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. You'll have from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would yield 2.5 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from Kentucky and the co-chair, of the Second Amendment Caucus, Mr. Mass.
Gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, Democrats today want to introduce gun control legislation that they say is going to make you safer. They want to expand background checks. But what does background checks accomplish? Well, the DOJ said there were 112,000 denials in a year. Who are those 112,000 people? Well, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle would have you think those were felons. They saved you from those felons. But how many of those 112,000 were prosecuted for that crime of trying to acquire that gun? According to the DOJ, 12. 1, 2, 12 in a year. Who were the other 100,000? Imagine, just imagine now, that you're the victim of an abusive relationship, and after 5 years you've summoned the courage and the resources to separate from that relationship. The things have escalated, and now you've decided it's time to acquire the means to protect you and your children. So you go to the gun store and you try to buy a gun. The clerk presses the computer button, it says denied. You ask the clerk, why was it denied? I don't know, this happens sometimes. Maybe you had a similar name to somebody else in the database. You can't buy a gun today, tomorrow, next week, not ever. You've been denied. So you go to a friend you've known for a long time. The friend says, I'd like to help you. You say, well, I don't know if I'm going to make it through the night. The friend says, I'd like to help you. But don't you know, H.R. 8 passed, and it was signed by the president. I can't spend a year in a cage. Good luck tonight. Now, I'm not going to ask you to imagine what happens next, because the Democrats saw fit to put into this bill a requirement that you have an imminent threat of death. The threat has to be right there upon you, or great bodily harm. What are they saying? Well, if you're just expecting a few bruises and maybe a punch, put some ice on it. I'm going to ask my colleagues here today, I'm going to challenge the sponsors of this bill. And those of you who might think you would vote for this bill, to consider whether it's fair. Is it fair to surround yourself with armed guards, with Capitol Hill police who have guns, with personal details, bodyguards, and ask the people to pay for it when you make it harder for those same people to protect themselves? I don't think that's fair. And for the fact checkers who are already hard at work on this speech, I ask unanimous consent to submit to the record the GAO report on the DOJ statistics on background checks.
Without objection.
I yield back.
Higher. The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 1 minute to the distinguished majority leader of the House, Mr. Hoyer.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Well, that's an interesting speech to follow. Mr. Massey was very energized. I haven't seen, of course, that which he submitted for the record. But 90% of America thinks this bill makes sense. 90%. Take your own polls. Poll after poll after poll shows overwhelming support of this legislation because it's common sense. It's common sense that you want to assure the community that those who buy weapons that can be used with deadly force, as the gentleman just indicated, are not a danger to themselves or to others. Mr. Speaker, according to the database from the Associated Press, USA Today, and Northeastern University that tracks mass shootings, which they define as 4 or more victims, not including the shooter, 2020 was a standout year. After years of setting new records for mass shootings, 2019 had the highest number recorded, 33 mass shootings in 1 year. But in 2020, there were only 2 mass shootings. One in February, and another in early March. Of course, Mr. Speaker, those numbers don't count the hundreds of shootings each year in which there are fewer than 4 victims with tens of thousands killed and maimed by gun violence annually. But the contrast in the number of mass shootings from 2019 to 2020 is stark. Madam Speaker, I don't have to explain to my colleagues why mass shootings suddenly came to a halt last year. But it shouldn't take a deadly viral pandemic, which took us out of group meetings, which took us off the streets, which kept us at home, to stop a deadly epidemic of gun violence. With the arrival of vaccines and passage of President Biden's plan to help make it safe to reopen businesses and schools, we will soon be gathering in groups once more. But nobody wants to see a return to mass shootings, Mr. Speaker. Nobody wants to see a return to deadly school shootings that terrorize American students. We shouldn't need a pandemic to reduce gun violence in this country. The way to do that ought to be through passing common sense gun safety legislation through Congress to make it harder for deadly firearms to get into the hands of those who cannot bear them responsibly. That's what H.R. 8, the Bipartisan Background Checks Act, would do. 9 out of 10 Americans support the reforms in this bill. Now, I know I've seen some people, Mr. Speaker, shake their head. No, that's not the case. Show me a poll that has less than 80% of the
Tearing my body.
should not be able to buy guns, that felons should not be able to buy guns, that domestic abusers should not buy guns, particularly in an accelerated
Well, they ain't the only one that's killing and shooting some fucking body.
You get mad at a partner, you get mad at
You got Zimmerman, you got the other son bitch just choked
go down the store, boy, get a gun, bang.
That don't mean he ain't shot no fucking body before.
It's one thing to have a thoughtful purchase. I want to have a hunting gun. I want to have a handgun for target practice. I want a handgun for safety in my home, in my business, in my car. But if you're a person who has shown that you're not somebody who is a responsible person, sort of like driving a car, if you're not responsible, you're a reckless driver, and you've been guilty of manslaughter by automobile or something of that nature. People have a right to know that what you do is going to be not a danger to them.
Every time you have one of these shootings,
Example of legislation that truly reflects the will of the American
you
people.
lay the blame
That's why I hope we
at
come
my
together
feet.
to pass it with bipartisan
American
support.
citizen
I don't know
ain't
that's
never
gonna be the case.
maliciously
But it's
shot
not the
anyone,
case.
anybody. But every time you have one of these
Reflects the will of
shootings,
the American people, which would like to see
it don't make no difference.
on a bipartisan basis.
Because people not getting them guns anyway from no goddamn reputable buyer anyway. If they can't buy it, that means it's game over. They can't have it.
No, that's not the case. That's one thing. But I'm seeing a poll that doesn't reflect that. Just as I believe we ought to do this week.
It's already, if you're crazy, if you was a convict on paper and you ain't supposed to have it. The one thing I don't agree on, and that's this domestic violence shit.
9 people in church slain by somebody who got a gun.
But if
the report had come back in a timely fashion, wouldn't
the aggressor can't have one, then the victim can't have one either. Now that's where once they vote for it, then they back trying to cry about it. Well, you can't have no gun to protect yourself because you was in a domestic violence. We gave you the benefit of the doubt, but we don't know if you go back
But the Supreme Court itself
and
said that there could be responsible
retaliate and blow the guy, a man or a woman's brains out because by court.
that amendment. That's what this bill does. I hope our friends will listen to the voices of parents, children, siblings, spouses, neighbors.
Yeah, it's true. You got some goofy motherfuckers that just don't know how to take your ass. If she done what she done with you.
Too many eyes of pain and so many hearts. Parkland. Now, some believe Parkland didn't happen. They're wrong, of course.
Damn it, it's only pussy. It is her pussy, so let it go, bastard.
Las Vegas, Orlando, Pittsburgh, Annapolis, San Bernardino, Washington Navy Yard, just a few blocks from here. Oak Creek, Tucson,
And then you
Virginia Tech,
get your
and the
drippy
list
draws
could
and
go
go on about your
and
business.
and on. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, let's
Next
not
time,
add more names to this
let the
registry
next
of grief.
whore make her little $2.
Let's not
You
rely on a
understand?
pandemic to do what we ought to have done so long ago. Let's pass these bills and reduce gun violence the right way with our votes. Is this a perfect bill? Will it establish or accomplish the absolute safety? It will not. But what 90% of Americans say is it's a step in the right direction. Mr. Speaker, let us take that step, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
No, it does, Mr. Speaker, no, it doesn't. Gentlemen, the previous speaker said this bill becomes law, it'll stop some of the mass shootings, all the mass shootings that happen in this country. No, it won't. Nothing in this bill would have stopped any of those terrible things that took place. What this bill does is stop law-abiding citizens from exercising their Second Amendment liberties, just as the gentleman from Kentucky mentioned a few minutes ago. I would yield 1 minute to the gentlelady from Indiana, Ms. Sparks.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to H.R. 8. A major reason our founding fathers drafted the Second Amendment is to have a check and balance for the people against the tyranny of government. It is the Second Amendment for a reason, not the ninth or 10th. You must have the second to protect the first. The first action by history dictators, and we know all of them, was to take guns from law-abiding citizens. We must remember that there is no law that stops criminals from getting guns or committing crimes. We would have empty prisons otherwise. As someone who grew up under a tyrannical government, I value this right tremendously, and it helped this right a lot of Americans to have equality and freedom. And I encourage my colleagues to be vigilant and protect this right for all law-abiding Americans. I urge my colleagues to oppose this bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Ohio reserves. Gentleman from recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 3 minutes to the distinguished sponsor of this bill, the distinguished gentleman from California, Mr. Thompson.
Gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, gentlemen, for yielding. Every day, 30 people are killed by someone using a gun. That number jumps to 100 if you factor in accidents and suicides involving guns. The steady stream of gun violence devastates families, communities, and schools. Gun violence costs our country $280 billion every year. This status quo is not okay. Our constituents know it, and they support H.R. 8 overwhelmingly. The special order last night on H.R. 8 was another low point for decorum in the House. To be generous, it was an embarrassing display and a complete misrepresentation of the facts. Viewers were told that the bill would create a federal gun registry. Wrong. Read page 5, line 18, H.R. 8 prohibits any registry. They were told that you can't give a gun to a family member. Wrong. Read page 3, line 7. You can. They were told that you can't transfer a gun if someone was suicidal or needed it for protection to address a self-defense situation. Wrong. Read page 3, line 21. You can. They were told that you can't lend a gun to a friend to go hunting. Wrong. Read page 4, line 16. You can. What the bill does do is close the private gun sale loophole, which has made it easy for felons and other prohibited purchasers to buy a gun online, at gun shows, or in person.
They ain't the ones that's the only one that shooting somebody. There's a lot of the people that can get the motherfucker. Is the one that's running around just shooting people. Come on, keep it a fucking stack, man.
Every day. But without universal background checks, these people can take their business elsewhere to someone without a federal firearms license and buy the same gun. I personally filled out the 4473 form required to buy a gun from a licensed dealer.
Y'all hear my guitar, man, my bass man.
It's something
It's
that
rocking
every
pretty good.
responsible gun owner should be able to live with.
It looked like a cat with a toe-up tail.
Help stop dangerous individuals from getting a gun. In 90%
It looked like a dog with a broke tail, a lion with a broke tail.
Mr. Speaker, I ask that these letters that I have from dozens of gun violence prevention groups, healthcare workers, law enforcement, and others be made part of the record. On the bill, we have co-authors who are Democrats and Republicans, cops, hunters, gun owners, district attorneys, a former FBI agent, and veterans who have served in combat and put their lives on the line to protect our Second Amendment. There's bipartisan support for universal background checks in Congress and near universal support for background checks from the American people. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on H.R. 8. And I yield back the balance of my time.
That objection, the materials will be entered into the record.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Georgia, or excuse me, a minute and a half to the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Hudson.
George is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my good friend from Ohio. Bottom line is, we all know that by definition, criminals don't abide by the law. And that applies also when they are purchasing firearms. Nothing in this bill prohibits this type of individual from obtaining firearms. In fact, the majority of individuals in prison for committing crimes with firearms obtain their firearms through theft, the underground market, family members, and the like. But what this bill does is threaten everyday American citizens with up to a year in prison and a $100,000 fine for exercising the Second Amendment right and doing common practices. This is, and to say that this does not create a national gun registry, you cannot accomplish what's in this bill without a gun registry. The reality is universal background checks do not stop mass shootings. We do not have mass shootings because of a lack of background checks. This bill will not make our communities safer. In fact, what it will do is cause law-abiding citizens to lose more of their Second Amendment rights. We shouldn't be focused here in Congress and taking those rights away. We actually should be strengthening the enforcement of laws we already have to make our communities safer. I stand with the Constitution and urge my colleagues to vote against H.R. 8. I yield back.
Gentleman from Ohio reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the fact is that 160 felons every day buy guns. All this bill does is to say that people who buy guns, who obtain guns from unlicensed dealers as well as licensed dealers, must be subject to the background check. And that will save a heck of a lot of lives. I now yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentleman.
It don't help nothing.
Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee.
It don't help nothing. They talking that bullshit, but it don't help nothing. Cause if a motherfucker got in their mind, they can wake up and stick somebody in the eye with a toothpick. The motherfucker gonna do it, man.
Because the Second Amendment does not prohibit regulation, it never did. And our founding fathers
So y'all can see what I'm watching this for real. I'm watching it as it goes down.
And indicate why the COVID-19 pandemic dominated news headlines in 2020, the number of shootings surged in many communities across America. Our public health and emergency resources have been straining to respond from the coronavirus, but budgets are crunched nationwide, and as well, gun violence is rising. It's important to note because approximately 80% of firearms used for criminal purposes are obtained without a background check. We must strengthen our firearms because background checks and close dangerous gaps such as the online sale and gun show loopholes. In the data that we were able to secure, there was nearly one mass shooting per day in the United States, 355 mass shootings in 2018. We realized that since December 2012, there have been at least 1,518 mass shootings with at least 1,715 people killed. Each day, an average 92 Americans are victims of gun violence, resulting in more than 33,000 deaths. And I wonder why our friends could not feel the pain of the loss of guns being transferred illegally or improperly. I was here for Columbine. That happened on April 20th, 1999. High school students losing their lives. I was here when babies were killed in Newtown, Connecticut, December 12th, 2012. I was here in the United States Congress each moment we tried to pass sensible gun legislation like H.R. 8, thanking you Thompson, for your leadership, and Chairman Nadler. On February 14, 2018, I was here before Parkland and look at these. And as well, I was here on May 18th in San Jose, Texas, when people died. It is time to pass H.R. 8. Stop seeing our
The
children
gentleman's
die.
time has expired. Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Now,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield a minute and a half to the gentleman from Utah, Mr. Owens.
Gentleman from Utah is recognized. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in opposition to
all right, y'all.
1446.
Y'all hear my bass guitar mic? It's rumbling now, baby. It's playing like it's real smooth. I ain't having no problem now.
And finally, stand up for our rights and hold these measures with every tool. I absolutely will fight these measures with every tool in my grasp. These rights protect my life, liberty, and property. They're granted to me by God. It cannot be taken away from me by DC bureaucrats. I grew up in the Deep South at a time when black Americans were unable to defend themselves. After the Civil War, black codes and Jim Crow laws prohibited people of color from owning firearms. In mid-1950s, Martin Luther King Jr. kept firearms for self-protection, but his application for concealed weapon permit was denied because of racist gun control laws in the state. As a child, my dad witnessed an altercation between his father and a southern white man who thought my grandfather was being disrespectful and threatened to teach him a lesson. Later that night, he drove up to my grandfather's home with a bunch of his friends, standing on the forerunner of a Model T Ford. My grandfather was prepared. He and his brothers had hidden around his front porch. As his bullies and cowards approached the house, they heard the click of rifles and left as fast as they came. Without firing his gun on another human being, my grandfather's right to own a firearm ensured his rights to protect his life, liberty, and property. I urge my colleagues to vote against these anti-Second Amendment bills. Thank you very much.
Gentleman from Ohio reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 1 minute to the distinguished gentleman from California, Mr. Swalwell.
Gentleman from California is recognized.
I thank Mr. Thompson for this legislation because it takes the most dangerous weapons out of the hands of the most dangerous people. I've heard from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle about rights. Let's talk about some other rights in this country, like the right to pray in church, the right to dance at a party, the right to come
Well,
home from a
you had that
conflict,
the dumb bastard you in, and you got him a goddamn Happy Meal after he shot all those people that was unarmed in the church.
I think about a mother who told me a
You
couple
want
years
to
ago to
explain
keep
that one?
fighting on this issue because every day when she puts her children in the car,
What
sends
about
them
that
off to
stupid
school,
little son of a bitch?
before they get out of the car, she closes her eyes to remember what they were wearing.
He wasn't exactly something wrong with him when he got his gun, right? So what does that mean? That means anybody can get one and any goddamn thing can do about it after some bitch does it. But goddamn, if the son of a bitch shoots you a raggedy shot, you're like, oh my God, you got me. And then pull out of your holster, pow, 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 right back. Motherfucker, fuck you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've been told.
Oh my God, he shot me. What'd you shoot me for, motherfucker?
Because 99.99% of Americans have now.
He's standing over you, grizzling like he's something real, like a monster or something. Till you just go ahead and sling one back. Then motherfucker, oh, probably dropped the gun and everything else, bitch. Shot me for what? Because you having a bad day? Motherfucker.
And yet, over and over, we have people coming here. Usually they mean well. Look, this will protect people when the fact is that they can't point to any of these mass killings they talk about that would have been prevented. So let's talk about lives that would be saved. Think about the people that are shot every day.
Every damn day.
Would their situation be different if they were not having it so difficult to legally get a gun? I mean, I've tried, I think we had thousands of cases, felony cases that came through my court, and we tried a lot of those cases. Over and over, you hear the criminals, they're not obeying the law, they're not going to follow the law.
He's sitting
They
up
got
there,
their guns
looking at his
illegally.
nails and shit.
And this will not change at all.
Done killed some
any of
motherfucker,
those
about 9
we
people
tried and
unarmed.
convicted for getting
Motherfucker could walk up there and buy any gun he wanted. He did that, and then he went in there and he could got tired of shooting a tin can and went in and just shot people. What you talking about?
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Maryland.
Then you had Zimmerman.
From New York, I'm sorry.
Then you have all these other people running around just because they got a gun. Now they feel they're on the level with the police and everything.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Americans are 25 times more likely to die.
You didn't go through the damn shit, man. Go sit your ass down with your little goddamn gun. Go. You ain't that. You didn't go through no goddamn. You didn't go through the shit with them, right? The academy or whatnot. So now you want to cop out. You want to be a fucking neighborhood hero.
Making life for Americans nasty, poor, solitary, brutish,
and just shoot somebody. Then you want them to back you up because you was just an informant. And you felt real. You know, you had a lot of confidence just because you had that gun, right? If you didn't have that gun, you'd have thought twice when the boy tell you, man, get out of here, quit playing with me. You be around here all the time. You already know. Why you acting a fool today, man, tonight? Go on, Zimmerman, quit tripping. How about that one? How about the other motherfucker just shot the boy because he pushed the man up in the tater chips up in the damn store and took the black and miles that he wanted. Swizzler Sweets. What about that? Just left him like he just shot a squirrel or something in the woods and just left him there.
H.R. 8 will not save lives. As Justice Scalia noted in his decision in Heller,
well, I'm gonna let y'all get back. What's going on with you, Cutting?
Right, and that right shall not
let me see. Let me put my eyeballs on this.
Recent shootings. In Parkland, the shooter acquired the firearm legally from an FFL after undergoing a NICS check. The same thing in Sutherland Springs, Texas.
All right, let's see
what
happens.
The same in Las Vegas, Nevada. And the same in Orlando, and I could go on because the list would produce the same result. They got their guns after a background check, including in El Paso. Criminals who seek to do harm get guns, regardless of the new restrictions imposed by H.R. 8. And with very limited exceptions, H.R. 8 makes it illegal for Americans to get a gun if a non-licensed importer, manufacturer, or dealer is not involved. And how will government know if an illegal transfer occurs? Without a registry, this bill is unenforceable. I've heard supporters of this bill say that other countries have similar restrictions, so we should too. And I counter with the fact that other countries do not have the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment was included to ensure that the United States would be different than other countries. I oppose this bill.
Check your message.
And I urge my colleagues to do the same. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York. Mr. Speaker, I now yield 1 minute to the distinguished gentlelady from Washington, the Jayapal.
Okay, let's see.
Of H.R. 8, the bipartisan
You still watching or you not?
Act. This bill is among the most common sense gun violence prevention reforms, requiring background checks
their
for
friends will
unlicensed
be
sellers.
able to watch
This is not complicated,
this
Mr.
video
Speaker. This is simple.
I don't know. I'm
Under
talking to
H.R. 8,
her. I'm just
people
trying to
who
get her
wish
on
to
here.
transfer a firearm would have to visit a licensed firearm dealer to run a background check before the transfer could be finalized. Most of these checks